Having a safe and affordable home is essential for all Americans to thrive. For decades, low-income families have struggled to access affordable rental homes. However, this issue has now become a significant problem for the middle class as well. Millions of middle-income earners are unable to afford rent in major U.S. cities due to the steep rise in prices since the pandemic. Without significant pay increases or government assistance, these middle-class households are being excluded from the typical middle-class neighborhoods. This exclusion triggers a chain reaction that leads to systemic poverty and lingering inequality. In other words, housing costs are suffocating the middle class. We have compiled several statistics and facts that demonstrate this trend. However, before we move on, we kindly request that you support our work and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our upcoming videos. The American dream used to entail getting married, settling down, purchasing a home, and growing old. However, in today's world, this concept looks vastly different. Buying a home is no longer an affordable option for everyone. Multiple financial burdens have emerged for everyday Americans, such as increased debt, soaring housing costs, and rampant inflation. These factors have contributed to the decline in homeownership and the shift towards renting. Currently, almost 43 million families live in rented apartments in America, which is the highest level in history. The surge in the number of middle-class renters has been staggering. In the past 5 years, the number of households making from $56,000 to $100,000 a year that decided to rent increased by 82%, according to a recent report from the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University. At the same time, rental vacancy rates are lower than they've been since 1985, and once renters do find housing, they have to pay the price. The typical home now costs about $80,000 more than it did just 2 years ago, and the average rent in the US is over $1,000 more expensive than it was in 2020. Rents are now climbing an average of 3.5% annually, while middle-class renters' incomes have declined 9% over the past decade. In an interview with ABC, salesman Robert Gary from Columbus, Ohio, said he always lived a comfortable middle-class life until the pandemic changed everything. Now Gary is seeing his pay rise fail in comparison to the rise in cost of living. "I'm living paycheck to paycheck and barely making it," he said. "I get a raise, they raise the prices to take my raise away." According to Gary, in December, his landlord informed him that his rent would increase from $1,710 a month to $1,950 a month starting January 2023. A $240 increase in a month was just insane stress, Gary said. "No one cares anymore. Companies are out there taking as much as they can get." When asked if he could afford it, the renter lamented, "No, not with the price of everything else right now. I mean, that's half my income." The only things he could find cheaper than this were in neighborhoods that he wouldn't feel safe in. The pace at which Gary was forced out of his middle-class lifestyle was extremely shocking to him. "It is unlike anything I have seen in my 60 years in America," he emphasized, adding that he now has to move out and stay with a friend until he can find a place he can afford. Unfortunately, similar situations are increasingly common for middle-income renters. In fact, the managing director of the Joint Center of Housing Studies, JCHS, Chris Herbert, argues that in 2023, rental housing in America is a tale of two markets. While higher-income renters are finding a healthier supply of housing choices, too many families earning less than $100,000 per year are having to make trade-offs between putting a roof over their heads and food on the table. In most metropolitan areas across the country, the American middle class has been spending far more on housing than they can afford, researchers found. A study highlights that 21.2% of middle-class homeowners and 46.3% of middle-class renters in the United States are either moderately or severely burdened by housing costs, defined as spending more than 30% or more than 50% of their income on housing, respectively. The property price boom of the past few years has pushed 70% of homes out of reach of first home buyers on middle incomes, especially now at the highest interest rates in over a decade. Those able to buy are having to save for an extra year to have a 20% deposit, the data revealed. Meanwhile, rents are consuming progressively larger shares of income. In Boston, for example, the median rent hit $2,680 in February, up 24% from 3 years ago. A household would need to earn at least $117,000 annually to afford this, based on the standard definition of affordability, in which one should pay no more than 30% of income for housing. Consider that in Boston, an elementary school teacher makes approximately $68,000 a year, and a registered nurse $73,000, and you get the picture that the middle class is getting squeezed. Median rents in Los Angeles are currently at $3,000, while in Washington, they are $2,600 per month. The demand for rental housing is high due to an exploding population of millennials burdened with student loans and low-paying jobs, baby boomer retirees downsizing to apartments, former homeowners exiting foreclosure, and millions of would-be homeowners who cannot access mortgages in the tight credit market. Everyone wants the same type of location, which includes cities, transit-friendly suburbs, and town centers that are walkable and close to jobs. However, the pace of new residential construction has been insufficient to make up for years of virtual standstill. In many cities, demand is so high that there are enough high-income renters to support prices that are out of reach for the middle class, lower-wage employees, and seniors. This supply and demand imbalance is expected to keep rents high for the foreseeable future. We are currently in a rental affordability crisis. 15 years ago, more than 2/3 of people who rented an apartment or a single-family home in the U.S. earned less than $30,000 a year. However, beginning in 2010, the share of middle-class renters surged as the country started to heal from the 2008 housing bust. This shift came as the economy drove up home prices to new record highs, straining family budgets across the country.
Do any millennials in Canada still have hope that things are going to get better? Or are things just such a dumpster fire that this is just what life is now? I keep seeing videos of people talking about how they're making $30, $35 an hour and they can't afford rent and food and to take care of themselves. What's the fucking point? What are we doing if this is what life's going to be? We're just working towards a goal that, what do we get? And I'm not even talking about how the jobs aren't there or anything like that, but just what is the point of living in Canada anymore if we can't even enjoy life? Am I wrong? Is it just a really small subset that I'm seeing, or is this what life is now?
This is Deuteronomy 30:7. And Yahweh, thy power, will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. Shalom. Kahala Yahweh B'Shem Yahshai B'Shem Kokodash. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Israel. Peace and mercy to the elect, for the house of David reborn again in this generation. And shalom to the 130 Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about the collapsing economy that's crumbling before our very eyes. In the two videos we just watched, you got some statistics of how the economy is failing the population, and also just a general reaction from an average, in this case Canadian, but ultimately an Edomite, making remarks about how he sees his economy. They no longer see the point in all of this. Because why? Well, because the things have gotten so bad. Now, we're all not blind. We all see what's going on. We see that Esau is pulling levers and strings and basically trying to bring down this economy to bring forward his new economy, that of the New World Order and digital currency system, which is going to be tied to the digital ID system, which will ultimately lead to the implantable RFID microchips, which are the mark of the beast. Well, as the guy in the second video says, it's pretty soul crushing from the perspective of your everyday world citizen. You see, a lot of these people who are currently complaining about these events, they're not in this truth, nor do they know the God of the Bible. Because if they did, then they would all know that this has all been prophesied, that all these things would have to come to pass before we come to the end. These people don't even believe we're at the end. They just think this is a bad period and that we'll soon come out of this. But again, little by little, people are starting to realize that there's more afoot to what's actually going on. And some people can see it, But a lot of people don't realize that what we are currently living through is the prophecies written about, referring to the 4 horses of the apocalypse. And currently, we're going through the events spoken about regarding the 3rd horse, or the black horse. Let's go and read it now. This is Revelation 6 and 5. And when he had opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and a measure of barley for a penny. See thou hurt not the oil and the wine. And right here, where it says a measure of wheat for a penny and a measure of barley for a penny, ultimately this breaks down to basically a day's pay, right? So a day's pay is what you're going to need to basically buy yourself something to eat. And that's what we're starting to see. We're starting to see the rampant inflation which is coming upon this economy, right? And not only just this economy, but the world in general. And this is because these devils that are driving the ship, these Edomites that are running the industry and the world for that matter, they're now making their moves to bring the people of the world to their knees, financially that is. And then eventually they want that to translate over to their sovereignty, meaning that they want people to live on their knees while they're the rulers of the perpetual kingdom that they're trying to establish. But that's not going to happen, because why? Well, the Bible says so. This is Job 14 and 5. Seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee. Thou hast appointed his bounds, that he cannot pass. And that's what's happening. See, these Edomites in power right now are trying to extend their rulership, and by doing so, they're going to bring down the current status quo, the current system of the world, because they believe if they could put everybody into subjection, or they could put them into this new world digital system, that they'll have no way of coming out of it, and hence Esau will be the ruler forever, since he's going to set himself on top. But again, this isn't going to succeed, because the Lord's going to take him down. So let's go and take a look to see just some of the examples of what's going on in this economy. It tells you here in Zero Hedge, it says Target CEO warns consumers are tightening up their spending, buying fewer groceries and toys. It says, following the warning from ex-Walmart CEO Bill Simon regarding the American consumer nearing a breaking point, Target CEO Brian Cornell has also signaled a cutback in consumer spending, groceries included. This trend aligns with our view, as well as views from JP Morgan and Goldman, that consumers have hit a wall. On Thursday morning, Cornell spoke with CNBC Becky Quick on Squawk Box about the retailer's challenges, including the cash crunch facing consumers amid high inflation. He provides a unique insight into consumer behavior patterns at stores nationwide. He goes on to say, they're managing that budget really carefully, and it certainly is pressuring discretionary spending, Cornell said. The exec continued, they're purchasing fewer items even within the food and beverage sector. When we examine overall retail spending and observe the total line, it appears there's a really healthy consumer out there spending money. But even in the food and beverage categories, over the last few quarters, we've seen a decline in the units, the number of items they're buying. So they're even tightening up their spending in those categories in discretionary goods. We have seen 7 consecutive quarters of decline in both dollar and units. This means consumers are buying less apparel, fewer items for their homes, and fewer toys, he said. It says CNBC Quick then asked, we see areas in the economy where things look great. The GDP rebound is 4.9% for the third quarter, but what you're describing sounds like a recession in certain areas of the economy. Cornell responded, I think that's a really fair assessment. It underscores why it's so crucial not to just look at the top line, but to delve deeper and examine what's happening in different categories. We need to consider the impact of the last 3 and 4 years of raising costs on how Americans are budgeting each week and understand that they are trading off. For 7 quarters, they've been purchasing fewer discretionary items, and they're not buying the goods they were during the pandemic. Now that will change over time, and we're certainly planning consecutively in those categories. So basically what he's saying is that people aren't spending what they don't got. People are trying to save because they're worried about their finances for the most part, okay? And this has been going on for many different quarters, meaning that this isn't just a happenstance. This is a trend, and it's a change in the behavior of consumers. And why is that? Well, because people are starting to see the writing on the wall. People are seeing that hard times are coming. This is 2 Ezra 16-21. Behold, vitriol shall be so good cheap upon earth, that they shall think themselves to be in good case, and even then shall evils grow upon earth, sword, famine, and great confusion. And that's what's happening. See, the consumer, well, at least I should say the smart consumer, is trying to prepare for the impact of the coming recession and hard times. This is why they're buying less, because again, things are starting to go up in prices, so hence people have to save their money or basically spend money on requirements like rent, as we've seen in the first video, talking about how rent has skyrocketed. People who were in the middle class have either been kicked down to the lower class, or they've managed to make something of themselves in this crazy economy, and they've gone to the higher echelons of the society. But that's not really the rule, but more the exception. Now, that being said, these curses that used to be on us Israelites, the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, and in fact they still are, but they're starting to transfer over onto our enemies, that being all these other nations. And these other nations are now starting to feel what we have gone through, okay? And because of that, this is why this economy is collapsing. And plus, this is, like I said, this is Esau's plan to bring forward his new world order, is to destroy the old system, and from the ashes rise up his new kingdom, right? His new world order that rises out of the ashes like the phoenix. Hence, when you go to the Colorado airport, you can see the murals they have there, and also at the UN building, showing a phoenix coming out of the ashes of destruction and war. But all this, though Esau's planning it, is all by the will of the Lord. And why is that? Well, because you see, the Lord is setting up a trap for these Edomites. And when I say Edomites, ultimately I'm talking about the Caucasian race that's in power, right? The Lord is setting up a trap for Esau to fall into. It says, from Zero Hedge, this is another article, it says, living paycheck to paycheck has become the main financial lifestyle for U.S. consumers. So you see, Esau, in his pursuit of this new world order and to bring forward the mark of the beast and the digital ID and money system, he's ultimately putting a heavy burden upon the people of the world, especially people here in the westernized world. It says, the article goes on to say, despite the fact that our politicians in Washington have been borrowing and spending trillions of dollars that we do not have in a desperate attempt to prop up the economy, living paycheck to paycheck has become a permanent lifestyle for most Americans. And it says, in other words, well over half the country is literally living on the brink of financial disaster. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, there is no room for error. a job loss, a business failure, or a medical emergency can mean complete and utter financial ruin if you don't have a cushion to fall back on. That is why the results of the brand new survey are so alarming. According to the report that was just released by Lending Club, 62% of U.S. adults were living paycheck to paycheck last month. See, man, that's crazy. That's 6 out of 10 people in the United States are living paycheck to paycheck. It says, high inflation and higher interest rates continue to weigh on American households. As of September, 62% of adults said that they are living paycheck to paycheck, according to a new Lending Club report. For years, people like me have been warning Americans not to live like this. Living paycheck to paycheck only works if your paychecks keep coming in every month. Once they stop, you are at risk of losing everything. Now, these people, man, they say this like as if this is a choice, right? Like as if people are making a choice to live paycheck to paycheck. You see, these devils have already destroyed the economy, and this started all the way back in the 80s, and it made a real big impact in 2008 when the economy first collapsed due to the housing crisis. Now, since then, people have basically been trying to rebuild, but since the pandemic, people have basically been crushed, and all these jobs that the Biden administration says that they've managed to make are all bullshit gig jobs that don't mean anything, that are all basically part-time. This is why we're starting to see so many people with 2 or 3 jobs now, because they're trying to make ends meet. So this is why the number has gone so high. And again, this is why a Big Mac combo at McDonald's is like $17 now. You see, it's because these prophecies are coming to pass. These curses are starting to fall upon our enemies, and the Lord is starting to bring the events spoken about that come from the black horse upon the world, right? The economy is about to collapse, and what does this entail, right? This is the equal balance of what's happening to this Edomite empire to what happened to us Israelites before, right? This is why we say the black horse represents Jacob's slavery, right? Our downfall. Well, just like it was our downfall at one time, well, the balance which the rider on the black horse is holding, it has to swing the other way. It has to balance out. And what's that balance? Well, that's the destruction of our enemy's empire. And that's what we're living through, and that's what we're seeing in these prophecies playing out. This is Ecclesiastes 12:3. And the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong man shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened, and the door shall be shut in the streets, when the sound of grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. See, this is talking about the end time prophecies and the events that would happen when we are closer to the end of this empire, right? That basically the economy would come to a downfall, and that those whose jobs it is to forecast the economy, to report on it, right? Or as it tells you here, to look out of the windows, that they would be frightened, right? That they would see the writing on the wall. They themselves would be dismayed about, all the numbers and what they see coming for the future. And not only that, but as we've just read here, right? The grinding shall cease, meaning that the job shall go away. There'll be really no work for the people of Babylon the Great. And that's what we're seeing now. This is why there's so many people taking up these gig jobs, because that's really all that's around now. It's just part-time jobs, not like your traditional full-time jobs where you could stay at for 10, 20, 30 years. Now it's the average worker. If they manage to get normal, what we call normal nowadays, they tend to have about like 5 to 7, 10 jobs in their lifetime now. That's the new normal. Not like before with the boomers where you would stay with a company for all your life. All right, that's a bygone thing of an era long gone. And again, this is because these prophecies are playing out, Akim. Another article from Zero Hedge says, world's biggest shippers cut 10,000 jobs, warns of subdued global trade, right? Meaning, all this going back and forth, buying things from China, selling things to other countries, that's all coming to a slowdown, right? It's still going to happen, but at a lot lower rate. And because we get a lot of our things from the BRICS nations that align themselves with the BRICS instead of the NATO, alliance, a lot more things are going to become more expensive. And why is that? Well, because you see, the BRICS nations are going to start to trade in their own gold-backed currencies. And what this is going to require is that the US dollar is going to start losing purchasing power compared to these other nations which we get our goods from. And let's see what it says here. It says, the shipping giant A.P. Moller-Maersk AS reported a slide in profits and revenues for the third quarter, almost a full year. Check that out. Forcing the company to take a defensive position by eliminating upwards to 10,000 jobs as failing container rates and waning demand batter the global shipping industry, which could last through 2026. However, the shipper maintained its full year guidance at the lower end of the previously stated guidance. If you look at the order book and what is going to come over the next couple of years, I think we're probably settling in for a very subdued and pressured environment for 2 to 3 years ahead, Chief Executive Officer Vincent Clerc told Bloomberg TV's Mark Cudmore and Tom McKenzie on Friday morning. Maersk, which controls about 70% global container trade, started reducing its workforce from 110,000 in January and will be below 100,000 by the end of the year. This will result in a $600 million cost savings. Clerc said about 6,500 positions have already been eliminated. So you see that? So the grinding is starting to cease. And why is that? Well, because the jobs are going away, right? And the trade is starting to slow down because the people they're not working, and because they're not working, they're not buying. And because they're not buying, orders are not being placed. And there's a lot less to be traded. And that's only going to continue a cycle of destruction. This is Jeremiah 15:2. And it shall come to pass, if they say unto thee, whither shall we go forth? Then thou shalt tell them, thus saith Yahweh B'Shem Yahshai, such as are for death to death, and such as are for the sword to the sword, and such as are for the famine to the famine, and such as are for the captivity to the captivity. So the reason I bring this out is because you see, right now the Lord, He has His doors of mercy open onto the world. And when I say world, I'm talking about the Israelite world, the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, and anybody whose father's lineage goes back to that bloodline. And that namely is going to be anybody who resonates with this truth. Now, what's going to eventually happening, and I believe we're starting to see it now, the doors of mercy are going to eventually shut. And that's going to happen when the elect are sealed and the 1/3 have been awakened and are well on their path to claiming their salvation. When that happens, we're going to start seeing these other two big prophecies come to pass. World War III is going to start, and then eventually the mark of the beast is going to be made mandatory. Now, what we're seeing on the news now is that World War III is starting. It's basically all the chess pieces are being moved into place, and we're seeing more talk about this digital economy. Okay, just the other day, India, through their digital currency and ID system, Aadhaar, has just went through a large security threat where people have been gaming the system and basically using stolen Aadhaar digital cards. And what does that mean? That means that pretty soon they're going to come out with a solution that people are going to have to use an implantable microchip either in their hands or their forehead to continue in the Indian digital economy. And mark my words, this is going to happen in all the other digital economies that they bring around the world. You're going to see an adoption of it. People are going to get used to it. Then you're going to start seeing people take advantage and exploit the system, which is going to then require an implantable solution to prove your identity. Okay? So when that happens, and all these prophecies continue to play out, and all the warnings that have been told, starting by the apostles, me and the other Akim, what's going to happen is people are going to eventually wake up, and they're going to see what we've been saying this whole time, though they may not have liked the way we said it, is actually true. And then at that point, they're going to say, what can we do? And chances are we're not even going to be on the line anymore, or we're going to be hard to find, because by that time, the famine of the word's going to happen. And if they do find us, it's going to more likely be too late. So this is why, if you're watching these videos, it's good that you're studying and that you're taking this all in, because again, we got to get all this information before that day comes, before the mark of the beast is made mandatory. And this way you'll have the faith and the strength to withstand all these wicked prophecies that are about to come forward. Okay? So again, don't be caught out like these 2/3 that aren't going to know what to do, and then eventually going to find out that, you know, they're either going to be put to the sword, the famine, or go into captivity. Well, either way, Akim, hopefully this video was edifying. Until next time, I want to give all honor and glory and praises to Yahweh, B'Hashem Yahushai, B'Hashem Rukah Kodash. Shalom.